So, Dave Collins, welcome. Glad to have you, sir. It's all yours.
Thank you. And given that we're recording this, I'll give a little introduction to myself. Most of y'all know me already, and it's a pleasure to be with friends to share this discussion, this topic, and these materials. My name is Dave Collins. I worked at University of Texas for many years, trained as a therapist, and have a fair amount of religious studies background. Um, uh, had advisors along the way in religion and in psychology who were pretty sure I belonged in the other field rather than theirs. Um, a consequence of which is I've got a fairly ridiculous amount of education and a personal long-standing interest in meditation and contemplative traditions, particularly cross-cultural parallels, folks on different sides of the world doing very similar practices and techniques. And personally, most interested of all, of course, in actually doing the practices. Having said all that, Hakuin, and particularly Hakuin's art, which will be the subject of this little presentation, were not things that I had much previous background in. And I became quite interested and enjoyed getting myself acquainted with them. And as a consequence, I have way more material than we'll possibly be able to really cover or do justice to. Um, Having said that, there's sort of, it's a bit of a new age term, but a kind of holographic principle I find in that any one piece of Hakuin work has sort of reverberations or relevance for pretty much everything else he did. So that's another thing I'm telling myself as to why it's okay if we don't get to every slide, that any one or two is a rich place for discussion. Um, Given that there is so much, I'll invite us about halfway through. I'll let you know. We can just take a break and have some discussion before we go further. And if there are more immediate questions or something that Buddha tells you you just must contribute, feel free to raise a hand along the way, and Rick will be on the lookout for that. So I'll start sharing the website or the PowerPoint. As this first slide will be an indication, I'm also going to have a ridiculous amount of text on a lot of the slides. Do not feel a need to read everything on the slides. Much of it is there to remind me of things. I'll underline some things that I'm going to give attention to. But we'll have this as a recording. And for folks here, I'll look to make available this PowerPoint. So if you want to go back and look at some of the written material, that'll be an option that way. I'll also mention that many, in fact, most of Hakuin's artworks will have text on them. That's emblematic, the fact that he's not just providing decoration. He's looking to stir us up, to provoke us. He's a teacher, in other words. Hakuin is a name he gave himself, which means something like concealed in white, and may well be an allusion to Mount Fuji, the famous and beautiful mountain in Japan, which was in a viewing distance of his home monastery. He grew up in a small town and ended up at a small monastery from his hometown later in life, but became so well known, folks from all over the country would come and visit and study with him. He has a major place in the history of one of the two main currents of Japanese Zen Buddhism. The currents are Soto, with which the teacher Dogen is associated in a pivotal founding position, and Rinzai. Rinzai Zen is, to all effects and purposes in our day, Hakuin Zen. He took it on in a sort of moribund state and revitalized it and organized it, especially in terms of koan practice and a focus on having a breakthrough realization experiences, sometimes called kensho, which means literally seeing nature, and somewhat more extended translation, seeing our true nature. He was very interested in provoking folks to having these awakening experiences. And his school emphasizes the use of koans. A most famous koan is one he created. He says, we all know the sound of two hands clapping. What is the sound of one hand? I'll look to touch back on that question as we go along, but obviously from the get-go, you know it's not going to be a kind of logical, conceptual, intellectual question. What is the sound of the single hand is something he invited his students to be a question which stirred them to their core in order to effect a realization that was more immediate, more powerful, more beautiful, and often in Hakuin's case, more joyous than anything you can think up. He talked about Zen practice as one requiring a lot of faith, openness, a sense of the value in it. Two, embracing this quality of doubt, which the koans emblemize and provoke, questioning every inherited thought or concept in order to have something more original. And very much to work at it with everything you've got. This particular figure in this picture is a fellow named Hote, and we'll come back to him later. He was a favorite topic of Hakuin's painting, and was based on a historical Chinese monk, a fat fellow who, when you're around him, you couldn't but smile. There was something infectious about how cool, nice, fun it was to be around Hote. And here he has Hote asking the question, what's the sound of one hand? Hakuin did some art as a young man and kind of threw it away, did a couple of other pieces in his 30s, but largely began painting in his 60s when he was established as a teacher, and much of his painting was part of his teaching modality. He wasn't a professional artist, but he was talented and effective. And he made, here that says, well over 1,000 paintings and calligraphies in his lifetime. These are the sections I had laid out for myself in this presentation. The first two are just a slide or two to give some historical background and context. And then the others all list names of topics, things that he focused on with his artwork. I have a quote here. It seems to me just a little stiff of a translation, but I couldn't find any other translation where Hakuin is quoted as saying, art is produced by something we can't fully know. And it's like the innate nature of the mind that's also present in everything we do. I'll say here, and as we go along, the Japanese Chinese character for mind also means heart. That heart is something before words from the core of our being that's also there right now in everything we do. This is a little bit of background, historical. The picture on the left of the shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu was done about 80 years before Hakuin. The picture on the right, very famous, Hokusai's Great Wave, was done about 80 years after Hakuin. They're part of the Edo period of Japan. Edo is now known as the city of Tokyo. Ieyasu, the shogun, had conquered the country and inaugurated a period of peace and prosperity, as well as relative isolation. Japan was pretty much cut off from the rest of the world for much of that time, and patronized the arts. So you get a lot of creativity, a lot of color. His regime and the subsequent shoguns were a little bit more interested in Confucianism than they were Buddhism, as Confucianism has a governmental, organized the country morality focus. But the Buddhist too had a flowering of art production. Theirs, however, where you see all this color and action in these pictures, Japanese and Buddhist artists were largely influenced by previous currents in China. In China, the word Zen is pronounced Chan. That word, by the way, essentially means meditation. So the Zen school is the meditation school. And there's a rich heritage of art in the Zen tradition, beginning in China. This is one example. A lot of it is monochrome. Sometimes one brush and one color of ink to do an entire painting. Muqi was a monk and a great artist in China, 13th century. You may be familiar with this image. It's his most famous. And I consulted Wikipedia, Google AI, and ChatGPT for their comments on this picture. One of the greatest Shan painters. The subject is famous for gesturing towards what is the truth, what is immediate before concepts or names. And ChatGPT tells us it's about appreciating the present moment and underscoring the transient nature of things. This painting and another famous one by Muqi of chestnuts are typically shown once a year in a famous Zen monastery in Japan. But in putting together this presentation, I learned they came to San Francisco last fall.
Awesome.
And it was the first time they'd been outside of Japan in 800 years. So that's background. The Edo period, lots of flowering, literally and figuratively, of the arts. And Hakuin is going to inherit that more monochromatic Chinese Chan style of painting. Again, way more words here than you need to bother with, but this is a self-portrait of Hakuin. As I alluded to earlier, some of the main themes of his teaching is working on koans to have breakthrough awakening experiences. But in large measure, that's kind of the start of things. His also trademark focus was on additional, more difficult koans after some of the opening ones, and to extend our appreciation of life and wonder that we get glimpses of in awakenings for further integration, as well as to become competent to share one's own realizations with others, to become teachers, or as he puts it, to become a trouble to future generations of students. Much of Hakuin's writings also, it can be frankly tedious reading in our day, was critiques of the stale, go nowhere styles of Zen in his time. He was not slow to offer criticisms of how things could be better and needed to be better given the worth and wonder possible to us in life generally and the Zen life specifically. Often you'll see pictures of Hakuin's work cropped to leave out the words, but typically there are teachings that are an instrumental part of the images. As a little side note editorial, it was kind of fascinating and troubling how often looking for information about his paintings, I see images from museum websites. I see images from commercial websites that say, I'm sorry to be a little trite here. They say, this is a really cool picture. You should buy it. And they don't say what the words on the text mean, what the characters written onto the picture, which are an integral part of it. Hakuin is teaching. Hakuin is provoking. In this particular instance, he's making fun of himself. Self-portrait, and he's calling himself a broken down old shavehead who's unseemly, uncouth, and bad looking. This, I'm going to do a little section. One of his topics frequently was images of Bodhidharma. Bodhidharma's name in Japan is Daruma. Bodhidharma is the largely legendary figure who put Zen into motion in China. He's considered the originator of the Zen tradition. And this slogan characterizes Zen and is attributed to him. Zen understands itself as a special transmission outside the scriptures, without reliance on words or letters, pointing directly at the human heart, seeing true nature, and realizing Buddhahood. It's all about a practice. It's all about an experience. And here, Hakuin has taken that third line, pointing straight at the heart of a person, and made a calligraphy of it. He did a lot of different calligraphy styles, often powerful, very creative. I'll have more of that towards the end of this presentation if we have time. But it also just strikes me that the Sino-Japanese characters already are little pictures. And so he embraces the artistic potential there in calligraphy. Did a lot of it. Here's one of his pictures of Bodhidharma. Somewhat comical. Bodhidharma was understood to be from India. As such, he's a Westerner with great big old round eyes and facial hair. And the calligraphy reads, "See your nature, become Buddha." Most of these paintings are about a foot across and about a yard high, but there is considerable variation, and this is an example. This is a big picture. Not only is it a variance in size, it's in color. Most of his stuff is monochrome, but he's got here another picture of Bodhidharma, big old eyes, and the same inscription, "See your nature, become Buddha." There are many legends of Bodhidharma. One of them is that after he died, someone ran into him in the mountains walking back to India, and he was carrying one shoe. The person who saw him goes back and reports this, and they go and dig up Bodhidharma's grave, and there was another shoe in there and nothing else. Hakuin painted a picture of his shoe. This is how it looks as a hanging scroll. Many of these scrolls at the bottom will have a stick that is both to give weight to the scroll so it hangs down flat, but also that it could be rolled up and carried. In another work, Hakuin once said, Bodhidharma is everywhere, visible in everything. And for this inscription, he's written, even this is the reed Daruma. It refers to another part of the legend of Bodhidharma. He came to China. The emperor, who was all enthusiastic about Buddhism, requests an audience, brings Bodhidharma to see him, and says, I've done all these things, built all these temples and stuff. How much merit have I accrued? And Bodhidharma says, no merit. And then, slightly taken aback, the emperor says, well, what's the holy truth of Buddhist teaching? And Bodhidharma says, everything's empty and nothing holy about it. Perturbed, now the emperor says, who are you? And Bodhidharma says, I don't know. And he left. He left, and legend has it, stepped onto a reed and floated across the Yangtze River, went into a cave and sat in meditation looking at the cave wall for 9 years. In this picture of Bodhidharma's shoe, reportedly from his grave, Hakuin has put it on that reed that Bodhidharma had sailed across the Yangtze River on. Another picture of Bodhidharma by Hakuin, more or less traditional presentation. I offer that to contrast it with this one. Here, Hakuin has drawn Bodhidharma out of a Chinese character, the character that means endurance. So again, he's very creative. He's looking to stir people up, and he's crossing the boundary between what is pictorial and what is verbal. Neither, as it were, is to be taken flatly. All of it has dimension, all of it's coming from somewhere, and all of it is gesturing towards a realization, a provocation, an expression of an awakening experience, and an invitation to have an awakening experience. These are two images of what's called the enso, which is essentially a circle. Hakuin did several of them. The enso can mean a lot of things. This author, an American Buddhist teacher, John Laurie, says it symbolizes enlightenment and the universe and this moment just the way it is. Some Zen practitioners will draw an enso every day, just kind of to see where things are for them. This is one of those images. The Wikipedia entry for it suggests that it also has reflections of Japanese impermanence, rustic, nostalgic, endearing imperfection quality to it, a wabi-sabi. And one commentator notes that most often the inscription on a painting like this is just, what's going on? What is this? And that's the other one. Here, I did find the translation of the inscription, which is no space in 10 directions, not an inch of great earth. And here, that's a quote from an old Chinese Zen poem, which includes the lines, "A branch of plum blossoms is enshrouded by rain. The golden one," meaning the Buddha, "smiles without speaking. No space in the 10 directions, not 1 inch of great earth." Again, I don't pretend to have a definitive interpretation of these poems or these images, but I'm reminded once more of the potential for both a suggestion of a kind of universal, always everywhere truth, and a very simple here in the moment, what's going on for us right now as itself part of that miraculous truth and event. So here's Hote again. The name Hote literally means cloth bag. He was so beloved and liked in his lifetime. Once he had passed away, there was speculation that he was actually an incarnation of Maitreya. Maitreya is the Buddha of the future, the Buddha who's going to come. And many times when you see those fat Buddhas in statuary and stuff, it's this fellow. It's Hote. And Hakuin enjoyed painting him. This one, just a suggestion of Hote having a good time, entertaining himself, riding in a boat for moon viewing. I invite you to look at that bag. Hote's name is Cloth Bag. Hote carries a bag, and it's an enso. It's that circle of everything and just this. Here Hote's leaning on his bag, an avatar of the future Buddha, a jolly fellow who enjoys playing with children. He carries a large cloth bag full of what? Worldly possessions? Toys? Goodness? All of the above. So there's a picture of Hote meditating with the inscription, "Well, monk, what a surprise. Have you come to do meditation today?" Yep. And it's very clearly an echo of Hakuin himself. He has some sort of resonance, some sort of affinity, some sort of affection for Hote, the jolly Buddha. This is not Hakuin, but he would have been familiar with it. And I just want to offer it real quick. Famous Zen teaching in 10 pictures, a parable for the search for our true selves and thereby awakening. The ox is an emblem here of ourselves, of the truth. And so there's 10 pictures where he's looking for an ox. He sees some tracks. He's getting some inclination of what practice is about. He sees it, the possibilities of a realization. He catches it. He tames it. He rides on it and goes home. He's made peace with himself, with the way things are. He lets go of the ox and prays to the way things are. And in image 8 there, it's just an open circle. He lets go of his sense of his path, of his sense of his duty, of his conceptions of himself. He lets everything go. And on the other side of that letting go, he returns to things as they are, and or things as they are return to us. That's an awakening. And this is a reason I wanted to include the 10 ox-herding pictures. In the end, post-awakening, we're invited, we're expected, and we're naturally inclined to be of help to others. This is called entering the market with bliss bestowing hands, blessings, and it's an image of Hote, that laughing Buddha on a mission to spread kindness and understanding to everybody everywhere. Here's another Hotei, and I just wanted to throw this in because this is a contemporary artist from Korea who offered for this image of the 10th picture, the calligraphy, ragged and barefooted, you approach the market in the streets, even covered with dust. Why would the laughter cease? The bees and butterflies are happy because flowers have bloomed on a withered tree. That's an image of post-awakening. We let go, we get naked, we unknow. And on the other side of that letting go, on the other side of what's sometimes called the great doubt, there's a flowering, there's a blooming. We come back to life, we come back to the world. And I also wanted to offer it because it gives me an excuse to offer the original that it's from. This is a hand scroll. It's 20 feet long. This is the latter half of it. So this is the image I had at the beginning. Looked at a lot of these materials, but now Hotei is in service to Hakuin's characteristic trademark focus on koan practice, and specifically the koan of the single hand as a technique, a tool, a prompt and provocation to have a realization, to connect with something more fundamental than our words and philosophies, our concepts and creeds, to allow something to have us that comes up from beneath our very notions of who we are and what is what, something more original than anything we can make up in our minds and smile. Let me stop right there and invite any comments or questions thus far.
Know enough to comment.
You're in a good shape. Wow. There's a famous Zen story. I've used it in other conversations in our group. A monk who's going to be a teacher in his own right is on his pilgrimage. His name's Fa Yin. Pilgrimage, for those guys, it's kind of like going on internship. And he's staying with a monk, a priest in a little hut during some bad weather. He's not expecting much from this priest. And as he's getting ready to go the next morning, continue his pilgrimage, the priest asks him, what's the purpose of pilgrimage? And Fa Yin, to his credit, is honest and says, I don't know. And his teacher says, not knowing is closest to it.
Dave, one of the things that struck me as we went through that is many times paintings are used to tell a story, particularly like in the Middle Ages when people couldn't read or write, the Bible stories were depicted in paintings. Yet a characteristic of these paintings is that there's always writing on them. So, it begs the question, were the people more literate, or was it a combination of words and the image? So if you couldn't read, you could at least get something from the picture.
That's my suspicion, and I admit to not knowing exactly the answer to the degree of literacy in those days, but my suspicion was it was pretty good. And I hear in your comment part that you could get somebody to tell you perhaps what it says, but sometimes it's a piece of art itself. The words are all but inscrutable. They're just these designs. But even when we do have a clear translation, it's almost always poetic. and or a reference to another poem or another story. In other words, it's very much my sense that the images and the words, and sometimes the words are presented as imagistic, and sometimes the images are made of words. It's all a kind of song. It's all a kind of poem. It's all both a celebration and expression of an awakened sort of experience, an artistic, heartfelt realization, and an invitation to go and look, an invitation to let that image and those words play on your heart and open you to your life. Maybe I'll restart the word enlightenment as a translation for Bodhi in Sanskrit and Satori typically in Japanese, is a well, there's a bit of an agenda in the Westerners using that word enlightenment. It comes from the philosophes in France, the Enlightenment people looking to decry some of the shortcomings of Christianity in their day and celebrate a quote unquote rational religion that they saw in Buddhism, and they called the core experience of Buddhism enlightenment, when a more accurate, direct translation would be awakening. The gestures towards a mode of experience which effectively transcends our conceptual, habitual, intellectual modes of relating to the world and to ourselves, and a call, an invitation to integrate that. Bodhidharma is everywhere. Awakening is everything. Drink a cup of tea. Arrange a flower on your desktop. Write in calligraphic artistry. All of it is an expression of, an embodiment of, and an example of the miracle of living being. Here are some monkeys. And I just love this. Hakuin painted monkeys time and again as an emblem of the thinking, egoic, rational mind, which needs to let go. Here, the monkey is fascinated by the image of moon, but what he's looking at is actually a reflection, he or she. There's a reflection in the water, the moon, and the monkey's trying to get it. And Hakuin says, if you just let go, immerse in the living truth of this moment, drop into the water, the whole world then shines in dazzling clearness. Another image he did a bunch of times was a blind man crossing a bridge, a log bridge. And here, Hakuin's got a kind of sort of traditional landscape painting, but as he did time and again, he'd take a traditional motif or genre and he would tweak it. He would move it in another direction. In this case, the movement he's made to landscape painting is to paint some blind men on a bridge down there in the right-hand corner. And he did that image over and over. An emblem of folks on the path. Not sure how this goes, but nonetheless, doing what they can to reach awakening, reach the other side, reach life's truth. That last image looks like on the hanging scroll that's a part of. And it turns out there really was a log bridge not far from where Hakuin lived. And the suggestion is he's got that real life bridge in mind. He did these paintings. The inscription here reads, both the health of our bodies and the fleeting world outside us are like the blind men's round log bridge. A heart that can cross over is the best guide. Sometimes there were a bunch of men, people, figures, sometimes just a couple, sometimes just one, crossing over.
Dave, what are the things that are,
Kind of poles.
yeah, poles or
They're walking sticks,
walking?
canes. So these are blind folks, and they're using their canes, anything they have to try to find their way. Sometimes they let go of their sticks, sometimes they let go of their shoes, looking to find the path. There was in this period of time a lot of popular art, including things like decorating fans. In this case, Hakuin has taken it upon himself to draw a picture of a decorated fan. And on the fan, the image he's put for decoration is that crossing of the bridge. And again, this is what it looks like as a full scroll. How about making a bridge with your mind? Is what part of the inscription says. And here, an expression of what the world is like in an awakened experience. When the person crosses the bridge flows and the water stands still. And I toss this one in. There are suggestions. This may be a reference to what it's like when the bridge is crossed. For all people crossing the ocean of life and death, how enviable is the flight of the swallow. When students, both monks and laypersons, cast the initial koans, they have an awakening, they demonstrate that awakening to the teacher. He would certify it with a painting of a dragon staff wrapped with a horsehair whisk. The whisk represents the teacher, the staff represents the dragon that the student has turned into. And here's real quick kind of a panoply, the whole story brought together. Where you read right to left, the monkey is searching. Then there's experience of awakening, here symbolized by Bodhidharma. And then there's the life of teaching and sharing. So I'm going to stop here. The last couple of sections are going to be on the Bodhisattva of Compassion, who's Canon, and then I had a bunch of examples of his calligraphy. But I believe that may be an okay place for us to pause and reflect if folks have things they want to share.
Dave, when you look at contemporary Japanese Chinese Zen art, do you see a transition from earlier centuries, or do they try and maintain the same concept like you see in Russian and Greek icons? They don't want to change the mode or the model.
I'm not certain I really know the answer to that, but my impression is kind of an amalgam. There's, like Hakuin himself, deep respect and quotation of previous expressions of art and insight with one's own revitalization, one's own understanding, one's own appreciation of how it is. That's kind of characteristic of the Zen tradition in itself. They'll ask you these impossible questions, and on the one hand, they know when you've got it. On the other hand, when you've got it, you don't need them to tell you you've got it. You move on. There's several centuries before Hakuin, Zen teacher named Ikkyu, also quite an artist in his own right, and especially a poet, a rascal, very anti-authoritarian, rebellious, but consequences ended up that this anti-authoritarian rebellious person ended up becoming effectively the archbishop of Rinzai Zen. He became the head of the school. But when he's a student, he's on a rowboat in a pond outside the monastery in the middle of the night, and he hears a crow caw. And he happened to have different associations from his own life with crows. And it split open his heart. He knew. And he goes and wakes up his teacher to tell him. And the teacher, I'm now going to paraphrase, but the teacher tests him by saying, oh, that sounds like a lovely experience, but it's not the real awakening of our tradition. To which Ikkyu replies, you know what? It's good enough for me. And the teacher says, oh, that is the authentic awakening of our tradition. So, long-winded reply, they have deep reverence for the tradition and for forms that have been passed down. And the call is to make it your own.
Thank you.
I just
Thank you.
like that. I like that Hakuin is depicted as always cheerful and fun to be around and laughing, and you know that's descriptive of the blissful nature of awakening.
There's very much that, and there's always an and with these guys. I'm reminded that of the many paintings he did of Mount Fuji, which was, as I say, within eyesight of his temple, he includes one with the retinue of one of the feudal lords marching past. The feudal lords are required to report to the capital from time to time and do, their loyalty to the shogun. And Hakuin draws this painting and then sends off a scathing letter to the officials saying, this is an utter waste of resources. Don't you guys have anything better to do with your lives than to march around in these fancy clothes and use up all this money that could be better directed towards our people? He got in trouble. Well, to this extent that he wrote one criticism of the government that was suppressed for a century. Nobody saw that letter for 100 years. He was also fairly irascible, as I sort of alluded to earlier, with regards to what he just saw as kind of a stagnant state of Buddhist practice in his country. So a lot of his writings today, it get a little tiresome to read because he's over and over again naming names, different traditions, different individuals, different facilities that could be doing more. So both things are true. He's got something to share, and it's like that Hote. He's laughing while he shares it. At the same time, he was quite demanding of his own students and not slow to criticize things that he thought could be better in society generally and Buddhist practice specifically.
Can you explain the photograph over your left shoulder, please?
Oh, thanks. I meant to earlier. I was trying to find a place in my little apartment that's not too distracting. But this image happens to be a Zen rock garden
Oh,
in the snow in Japan.
wow.